Hi, thanks for joining us. We'll get started in just a moment. It's going to give everybody another minute or so to jump on. All right, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Keeping It Consistent, Arizona's Procurement Determinations Library Cronin Awards Finalist Project. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're glad you're here. This is the second webinar in our 2024 Cronin Awards webinar series, but be sure to check out our upcoming webinars. On Wednesday, February 14th, join us for a look at Taking IT to the Next Level, Michigan's Professional Development for IT Procurement. Then join us Wednesday, February 28th, for a look at Better Relationships, Better Outcomes, Michigan's Lifecycle Supplier Outreach. Registration is open for those webinars and all the webinars in the series. Please visit NASPO.org to register and look for the webinars tab in the center of the page. We look forward to seeing you there. At the close of today's presentation, you will be asked to complete a brief questionnaire. Your feedback is very valuable to us here at NASPO. Today's presentation is good for one contact hour. To get your certificate, simply complete the questionnaire following the presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain the format of today's webinar. All attendees are muted. You can enter comments and questions in the chat box. If you would like to ask our presenters a question, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of the window. Questions will be addressed during a Q&A session after the presentation. I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today. We are honored to have with us Jessica Klein, Abigail Medina Salis, and Kim Shelley. Jessica Klein wears many hats at the State Procurement Office. As the Deputy State Procurement Administrator, Deputy Assistant Director for Compliance, and Procurement Counsel. Jessica has 2 degrees in government and has been practicing as an attorney since she got her degree from Columbia Law in 2006. Before joining the Arizona Department of Administration in 2021, Jessica served as an Assistant Attorney General representing the Procurement Office, among other state agencies. Since 2016, Jessica has only missed one NASPO Law Institute and is currently a member of the NASPO Law Institute Advisory Committee. Jessica is married to an Arizona native, has a couple of kids in their 20s, a teenager, and a ridiculous rescue dog named TJ. Next, we have Abigail Medina Salis. Since finishing college in 2010, Abby has served the state of Arizona at several different agencies and is currently the Chief Procurement Officer at the Arizona Department of Gaming. She lives in Phoenix with her husband and 5-year-old son. And we also have Kim Shelley. Kim is a second-generation public procurement professional and has worked in procurement for 12 years at multiple state agencies and local governments. For the last 2 years, Kim has worked in compliance at the Arizona Department of Administration, where she was recently promoted to the Senior Compliance Manager role. Kim holds certifications in virtual instruction design and is a certified professional public buyer. Her education includes an MBA and a bachelor's of music and music therapy. Kim is an Arizona native who lives with her husband of 14 years and 3 children, ages 4, 6, and 9 years old. NASPO is grateful to have you all here with us. And now I'll turn it over to you, Jessica. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. So as Megan mentioned, I am an attorney, which means we're starting with a disclaimer. Just a reminder at the very start of things that we are speaking on our own behalf, and these comments that we make over the course of the next hour do not represent any official policies of the state of Arizona, Arizona State Procurement Office, Department of Administration, or the Arizona Department of Gaming. We are speaking on our own behalf. I am very, very excited to be talking about this project. Before we got started, I thought it was important for us to focus sort of where we wanted to be at the end of things. And what we wanted to do was create a resource that procurement officers would find useful and really help them focus on things other than compliance with the Arizona Procurement Code. We wanted them to have kind of an easy path to a compliant procurement. And I put these quotes in. You can read them all at the end when you get a copy of the presentation if you want. But this is why we did it, and this is how we sort of measure our success when procurement officers tell us that it's an invaluable resource and that it, takes the guesswork out of complying with the procurement code. Today, we hope you leave here with an understanding of what it is that we did, what the SPO determinations library is, where you can go and find it. It's all publicly available. It's a little difficult to find on our website, so we walk through where it is exactly and provide you with links. And really, fundamentally, how you can replicate this process. I'm assuming you're here today because you're interested in process improvement. We really, this was a project that is near and dear to the hearts of everybody who worked on it. And we hope that you find some inspiration here so that you too can create a set of standard work documents and templates that covers your entire procurement code. This is something we did over the course of one fiscal year, and we're going to walk you through how. Just to give you a little bit of background on the state of Arizona, because every state operates differently when it comes to procurement. So in the state of Arizona, the authority starts at the Arizona State Legislature. It goes down to the ADOA director, who is technically the chief procurement officer for the state, but then all of those related responsibilities get delegated to the state procurement administrator, who really would be called the CPO in other states. Now, the state procurement administrator further delegates authority both within the state procurement office, our centralized office, and then in more of a decentralized fashion to certain state agencies. Now, most state agencies have at least a small delegation. Our very large agencies, like our Department of Transportation, have an unlimited delegation because they have the staff, the institutional knowledge, the resources, and they're so specialized. So in those instances, they have a full procurement structure within their organization. But one of the things that stays within that centralized procurement office, most of our big state contracts are when we're acting as lead state for NASPO, that comes out of our state procurement office, that centralized office. But our SPO compliance team that I head up is also within that state procurement office, or SPO, as we'll call it during the course of the presentation. SPO compliance maintains all of these templates, reviews agencies for compliance with the Arizona Procurement Code. When we have requests that need to go to our state procurement administrator, we usually forerun those. We've got forms that we've created and maintained so that that process runs smoothly. And we also work on updates to procurement regulations. So why are we here? The SPO determinations library. Now, I am the daughter of a librarian, so the word library is maybe more interesting to me than to other people. But for procurement officers statewide, this has become a resource that covers both the templates and the standard works for written determinations throughout the procurement code. We found that it improves service to those agencies. It reduces the time spent trying to get into compliance with the code, and it reduces the risk of non-compliance. So instead of just asking our procurement officers or dinging them for not complying, we're instead providing resources to procurement officers so that they can just do the rest of their job, hopefully more easily. What we did at the start was, we had an assessment of what the condition of templates was throughout our state. We found that there were no centrally available written determination templates, meaning, some of our groups had developed templates over time, but it was a, very uneven process. There was no training on how to draft those specific written determinations. So we really didn't have consistency across our state agencies, across procurement officers throughout the state. It sometimes led to supplier confusion and even protests, where, for 4.5 years, I was the AAG representing SPO. And so defending protests was my bread and butter. And this to me was a great way to reduce the risk of protests when, we were getting dinged for not having followed all of the steps required in the procurement process. We also wanted to make sure that written determinations were used at the proper time and included all of the required information. This we found, when we go through and check state agencies, when SPO compliance does that as part of our procurement compliance review process, we go through about 12 or 13 agencies a year at this point. We would find, missing documentation on some of these. We would find the documentation that was there didn't have enough information. So we were worried that it wasn't standing up to what the code required. Our response, we needed a clear determination standardization, a form that could be used across the state enterprise. We were able to work with our leadership, so there was buy-in to actually invest time, labor into the process. We recruited team members from different organizations throughout the state, and brought in a lean coach to provide support on the project. And then we determined which project management tools and format to use. This was very much a team effort. Jen Kalamag is on the call today. She was our project lead. As a true project manager, she wanted to stay behind the scenes here, but we can't talk about how well the project was set up and how well it ran without mentioning Jen's work. She's the one who set up the A3. We're going to talk about the process we went through to put all of that in place, but her role as project lead, making sure that we followed the A3 every week, making sure we knew what to do on what our responsibilities were ahead of time for each meeting, and knowing, what the timetable was for actually completing the tasks assigned to us, and really, keeping us on track during those meetings. I cannot give Jen enough credit for that. She's the reason we got this done in one fiscal year, and having a person with the responsibility to just drive the project forward is really valuable. Alan Hurdle was our lean coach. Jim Atkins, Abby and Kim, who are going to be presenting today as well. Charlie Stevens, who's over at Arizona State Parks. Krista Clevenger, who's not only a construction procurement manager, but she lives, out of Phoenix in Prescott. And then Cindy Hawk, who was a procurement manager while she worked on this project. All of us worked on this project virtually. We actually met for the first time in person with all of us in the same place when took everybody out to lunch at the end of the project as a, congratulations for getting everything done within the fiscal year. So this was something that we were able to do virtually as well, which I think is also kind of a feat in and of itself. We did a formalized project statement to start things out to make sure that we had a real focus so we would know what success looked like at the end of the project. And that focus was on getting a centralized, we identified that there wasn't a centralized document process and repository. We didn't have any standardization. So that was identified at the end of fiscal year 22, and we really got everything done by the end of fiscal year 23, which was our target. There was no repository. There was no single place to go to look for these templates. Before we started, we weren't quite sure what the universe was going to be. We knew that there was a high magnitude and high impact because this was affecting procurement officers throughout the state. So the scope of the project was on written determinations only within the code. So within the Arizona State Procurement Code, and we're a model procurement code state, there are places where procurement officers have to make decisions. And then there are places where procurement officers have to make written decisions, which are called determinations within our code. So for anything that required a procurement officer to make a written decision, we created a standard work and a template. as well as a process for developing and getting approval for those determination templates and standard work documents. We specifically included things that didn't need to be determined in writing, because we wanted to leave those, if you didn't have to write it down, it helped us keep our arms around the scope of the project and make sure that we really had an ending. The ending being when all of those determinations were covered. Next, please, Abby.
Yes, this.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm passing this over to Abby, who's going to talk about exactly how we did that determination using our project tracker. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to show you guys how we determined what was in scope and out of scope. The first thing we did was we pulled up our procurement code and we did a keyword search. We were looking for things that said determination, writing, written document, written request, written approval, keyword is written. Then we made a list. We did this on a spreadsheet and we listed the code citation where we found these keywords and the name of the section of the code where those were found. And then we ended up adding additional information that helped us organize the list. And this eventually turned into our tracker. And I am going to show you guys what that looks like. Give me one sec. Okay, you guys should be seeing a spreadsheet. This is what we use to track our progress on this project. So starting around cell A3, A10, I know there's a lot of information on here. You can see where we made the list of all the places in the code where we found those keywords. I'll explain the top in a little bit, but around this section, we just had additional things we used to classify each of these determinations, such as whether it applied to IFBs or RFPs, whether it was in scope. I'll show you guys that we ended up listing things here that were not in scope eventually. I'll show you guys those in a sec. We gave them a priority level based on our knowledge of how often these were being used. And that also influenced the dates that we started working on them. The lead team member is just the person to whom the document was assigned. On this section, column H, each person that worked on a determination on drafting it would come in here and you would just select where you were on the process. And that would influence what we would be talking about the next time we met to look over the templates that had been drafted. This top section here, this status dashboard, was really nice because using the information from column H, this was automatically populated, so we were able to see how far along we were on the project. And this was also used to show our leadership our progress. And down here, you can see there are some determinations that ended up being not in scope. Oftentimes, it was a request that was made to the state procurement administrator, in which case that was out of scope because that would need more of a form that we would submit to the state procurement administrator for approval. Let me go back to the presentation. Oh, and at the end of this, now the folks at NASPO will be able to give you a clean copy of this in case you decide to use it. Okay. Let's go back. Okay, this here shows an overview of the workflow that we use to create the templates. There are several steps here. The first was for each team member to independently draft the templates and the standard works that were assigned. The second step was for the team to review these documents during our scheduled meetings. The third step was a second level review by our template review board, The fourth step was putting the completed documents in the file repository. And the last step was long-term maintenance. And we're going to go over all of these steps in the following slides. So this was the first step to draft the template and the standard work. And for this, we created base templates for both the templates and the standard work documents for the team members to use while creating the actual templates and standard work documents. And I'll explain those in a little bit. Using the list from the tracker, each team member independently drafted the documents they were assigned, and the progress was tracked on the tracker, which helped us establish the agenda for these review meetings. Okay, this slide shows you the base template for the template. So this was the first one we created, and we looked over different versions of determinations that had been used in the past, and we identified which elements we thought would be valuable. And this shows the main elements that we determined to include in the majority of the templates, which includes a section for title, a place to identify which solicitation or contract it applies to, the specific authority under which the determination is being made, and a section to write the actual determination and the rationale. And then we decided to use red text to show what would need to be customized. So of course, we could still make other changes if necessary. This is a base template for the standard work. The standard work is a set of instructions that would explain how to use the template. Just like the previous one, we also used red text to show what would have to be customized. And we also came up with a naming convention, which was a combination of the code citation and the rule name. This title was used for the corresponding template also. And we also had a section for the revision number and date on the header, though it wasn't used on these base templates until the final document was approved and placed in the repository. And one important part of the standard work was to identify who owned the document. That way, if somebody had any questions, they would know who to contact. This is another section of the same template, the standard work template. You can see the header, which was included in each page, which had the version control we talked about in the previous slide. And we also added a prompts legend, which basically meant if there was red text used, that meant that the procurement officer would need to modify that content. If there was black text with a yellow highlight, that meant that the procurement officer would need to decide if the content was relevant. And if so, it would have to be customized. Otherwise, it would be deleted. And once the determination was completed, we also included instructions for the procurement officer to change all of the text to black. This shows the main section of, we're still continuing on the same template. It shows the main section where, in addition to step-by-step instructions, best practice tips and writing examples were included in more complex templates, such as the executive summary and protest response document. And Kim will review some of those examples in a bit. And for determinations where procurement officers are required to notify suppliers or interested parties, we also included a simple email script. And most of the state of Arizona uses Google for email and word processing and the like. So it's very nice for us to have this, because if one of us clicks this little blue M at the top, by the email script box, it brings that into a Gmail message. So it's just really easy to send out the required emails, notifications. Okay, the next step was to review the documents. So the library team met weekly to review and discuss the documents that had been drafted independently. And oftentimes, the person who had drafted the documents would bring up interesting issues for discussion. And we had a lot of fun conversations about our interpretations of the procurement code and best practices. Once we were all satisfied with a particular set of documents, they were placed in a different folder for the template review board. Next step was for the template review board to review and finally approve the documents. And this review board was made up of group procurement managers, such as the head of the IT procurement group, agency chief procurement officers, somebody from legal or compliance, and one member of the library team to provide context and explanations. These review meetings gave an opportunity for management to make sure the documents were aligned with their priorities and concerns. And the review board would sometimes make changes to the documents before giving final approval. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to Kim.
Thank you. Okay, so file repository. This was one of those decisions that actually took some time to make. Yes, it's the next step in the process here, but making this determination about where to put our file information took some time, took some discussion. We had to determine the best location of where to keep the documents, how are individuals going to be accessing these documents, and what is the best document format for all procurement officers to be able to access this. In this instance, we did end up using Google Suite, which was also compatible with Microsoft Office. And we'll go more into that in just a moment. But really, because as Abby alluded to, some of our agencies use Google and some of them are on Office, and there isn't a mandate for all agencies to be on the same platform. We needed some platform to allow everyone to be able to access it without issues. So our priorities were that it had to be easily accessible. It needed to use existing technology. We didn't want to have to go buy additional software. It needed to be simple to maintain, and we needed to be able to manage version control. I'm sure all of you have been in a situation where you have a template and someone has overwritten it accidentally because they didn't do a save as. So how we set this up kind of forces that save as to prevent our documents from being written over our main templates. The solution we came up with is we decided to use our existing Drupal website in conjunction with Google Drive. The reason we decided to place everything in the Google Drive is for that easy and simple to maintain, because uploading documents onto the website can be kind of cumbersome, where we have to add in the line, we have to upload the documents, we have to link it. And so having it here in the Google Drives allows for faster and easier long-term maintenance. At least it does for our team. So changes can be made quickly and not needing to take a lot of time. So if there's an error or a typo, we can change that the same day or within the next couple of days. So our website's already used to access procurement materials. So procurement officers were already familiar with how to find the website, and we just added a new section on there, which I'll show in a moment. And the website is already maintained by SPO with minimal IT intervention. So we're not having to constantly submit help desk tickets to get help from IT to update and make these changes. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're going to do a demonstration of how to find the documents library. So as Abby's pulling this up, it's spo.az.gov. The link here on this slide does work. And here we are on the page. And there are some screenshots to jog your memory on where to find things here. But here's the main page, spo.az.gov, and you scroll up here over to 4 agencies. And so this is where all of the agency resources are, like existing documents, our procurement regulations, linked to the Arizona Procurement Code. So under resources, NASPO newsletter, which we'll point out later as another resource to share information. But all of that is under our resource tab. And right here is the determination library. So we select that. And this is our landing page. Later on, we'll talk about some continuous improvements, and we have listened to those improvements and have updated and added things like this library index. But to look at the determinations, we click here on this green button where it says click to download files. And it brings up our Google Drive. Now, looking at this, it can be kind of overwhelming to find what you need, and we understand that. That is why we try to have that index available. And also, if you know exactly which code citation you're looking for, Google puts it in order, in alphabetical order. And so you can quickly just kind of scroll down to the code citation that you're looking for. And then there's also a feature where you can, let me just click here. You can do a Control F and actually just search for items that you're looking for. So for instance, we have like an MPTQ, which is not practical to quote for under 100,000, and it brings it right here. So you can do a search if you know. You can search by RFP, and I'll highlight all the documents with RFP in the document name. IFB, it'll show all the ones for the IFB. If you know the code citation, it'll highlight the code citation. When we looked at doing the naming conventions, we took all of that into consideration so we can try and make this as easy to find as possible for the document you're looking for. It looks like right now it's actually sorted by last modified. So there we go. Now it's sorted by name. So everything's all linked together. So when we look for the MPTQ here, it'll show both the template and the standard work. And those are intended to be looked at side by side, our template and our standard work, because our standard work includes like best practices. Okay, can we go back to the slide deck, Abby? Oh, I gotta give you back control here. There we go. Thank you. Go ahead. Okay, so long-term maintenance. So we talked a little bit about this already. And the things that we had to take into consideration for determining who was going to be responsible for the long-term maintenance, because there's nothing worse than going through all this work and effort and putting something in place, and then, things change, and before you know it, 6 months, a year, 2 years have passed, and all that effort you put into place are basically for naught, because now the templates are out of date, or whatever it is you've put into place. So we had to consider who's going to be responsible for maintaining and making these updates. How frequently were we going to be making updates, and how is feedback going to be received, and who is going to be reviewing that feedback? Next slide. So our priorities were to identify a centralized team where this wouldn't be a burden for them to be doing this additional process. We wanted to ensure that updates happen frequently. So mistakes, typos, outdated information, if there's a new executive order hanging out there that impacted these, we wanted those things to be addressed immediately. And we wanted updates consistent with the existing format. So people who are familiar in, the table that we were already using, the red text, the yellow highlighted text, that format. And we needed an easy feedback tool for procurement officers to find and to provide that feedback. So the solution we came up with is that the compliance team, as Jessica spoke about, at the State Procurement Office, became responsible for the long-term maintenance of these documents. Compliance is already responsible for updating other forms, And so it wasn't a stretch to then ask them to maintain these documents as well. And for the feedback link, we place that directly on the page, the landing page where the determination library is. So it's right there. You're not going to have to go searching to try and find provide feedback. And procurement officers can also just email directly to SPO compliance at azdoa.gov. Yes, thank you. And procurement officers and agencies are already used to sending information to SPO compliance at azdoa.gov. And so it made sense to allow that information and to have this feedback link directly sent over to that group email. Okay. So once we had everything in place, so now we've drafted everything, we've reviewed it, we've finalized it, we found a location that worked and determined who's maintaining it. We then had to do our implementation and training and our rollout. So throughout, as templates and standard works became drafted, we kind of did like an unofficial beta testing. So if we heard that so-and-so over here is doing a solicitation, hey, can you give this template a try? Or so-and-so just received a protest. Here, take a look at and try and use these protest templates in standard works. Do those work for you? And we would request feedback from them as we had them test out these templates. And so it wasn't like a hard beta test where it was like, okay, this agency is going to do this from this date to this date. It was as the templates became available and we heard of people needing them or people were asking, hey, is there a template for this? And we would say, yes, we do actually have a template for that. Give this one a try. Our rollout consisted of doing presentations at the CPO forum, which is like a every other month or quarterly meeting where the heads of the procurement offices at the individual agencies meet together and discuss important updates. We also have a SPO alert that were sent out, which is an email distribution list that we use at the State Procurement Office to distribute information. We had a lunch and learn training, Gemba, which was a live demonstration similar to what I just did, but a little more in depth, going through the templates and how to use them. And then we also put notice in the quarterly newsletters. So compliance also puts out these quarterly newsletters, providing updates and information. And that's where that link was that I pointed out earlier, where it has the newsletters. So there is a history of those if you wish to go back and take a look at what some of our prior newsletters were as well. But we did provide notice in there about the rollout and updates on other things as well. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to go into some of the templates that we drafted. These are just samples. We're not going to go into individual templates, but when we were doing our training and our rollout, we would go more in depth in these. So this is an example of one of our simple templates that followed the format that Abby had shown earlier. So a majority of our templates look similar to this, where you have your code citation under the authority, you have your in this instance, it's a notification section. In other ones, it's your determination and rationale. And then you have your solicitation number. So this is what a majority of our templates look like. Next slide. This is an example of one of our complex templates. So this does not follow the standard format that the other ones, that a majority of ours do. This is screenshots of our RFP award determination and executive summary. There are also similar templates like this for the IFB, RFQ, and request for qualification processes as well. And with this one and its associated standard works, there are a lot more detailed information talking about various code citations that may or may not be used often. tips and tricks to your procurement officers, to where really that standard work becomes kind of like a desk guide for procurement officers as they're going through this process. And this executive summary not only serves the purpose of providing a basically like a checklist for procurement officers to go through, and they just remove the yellow text sections that are not applicable. But also, if there was a protest, all of your facts and information is already cited here in a very easy to read format of the various steps that you've done. So this is one of our complex ones. And like I said, we have one of these for each of them for the award determinations. Next one. All right, so here's an example of our standard works. This is where it's filled out. This specific one is from one of our protest documents, protest standard works, where we have our code citations. And as Abby talked about, we developed the naming convention using in part the code citation and a summary of the rule name. So when doing keyword searches in that Google Drive, you can easily and quickly find what you're looking for. And of course, as Jessica stated, it's important that we always have disclaimers. So what is supposed to be helpful, our standard works, are not then used against us in a protest. Next. So our standard works covers step-by-step instructions, email scripts, and best tips. These are screenshots specifically of our step-by-step instructions and our email script. In this instance, the email script is going to interested parties because this is a screenshot from one of our protest standard works. But it could also be in other standard works, just saying, who is it that you need to be sending this information to? It follows the same format with the red text, the highlighted text in the instructions parts. And then this next one is an example of some of our best practice tips. So really the best practice tips, you're going to see more of those in our protest documents, where we're talking about like information that you might want to include or information that you may want to consider, as well as our executive summary and award determination documents. This one specifically is from our RFP one. I can tell because of the C318 citation here. But all of them have extensive information in the best tips to serve as, clarifications or things that are not already written somewhere else. And, part of that lively discussion that Abby was talking about, our own interpretations of the procurement code, we really tried to clarify that and put that in writing here in the standard works. Next. All right, so here is screenshots from our training for our Gemba rollout, where we did a live demonstration. So at the start of the training, we asked the question, how familiar are you with the SPO determination library? You can see that a majority of individuals mark themselves at a 3 or less, meaning that they've maybe heard of it or maybe had not heard of it at all. By the end of the training, we surveyed our attendees again over here on the left, asking them how comfortable do they report feeling now with this SPO determination library, how comfortable are you using it, and how comfortable are you with sharing this information with a coworker? Because that's really what's important, not only using it themselves, but how comfortable are they then sharing that information with those who may not have been able to make it to the training? And we had results. Just even after one training, learners are reported as now being comfortable finding and using the templates and standard work documents, and more importantly, sharing them with a coworker, because that's really where a lot of this success is by sharing it. Next. All right, so through all this process, and I think we've kind of touched on some of these things as well, is we found there were a lot of value added things that we discovered during the process. And I see Jessica popping on here and she'll probably have some comments on it. You were going to go over this stuff. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you, Abby, as well. I just wanted to kind of wrap this up with some of the added value that we saw. You know, this was a great training exercise in and of itself. There were a couple of questions about what a lean coach is. We did this as part of an AMS, Arizona Management System process. Some of you might have an Office of Continuous Improvement. We did a Green Belt Lean Six Sigma process. I'm not really going to go into detail on that end because I think with or without it, the most important thing that you can have going into this is knowing who's responsible for what and really having project organization and clarity of purpose from the beginning, because we were able to do just, you know, we had a manageable goal, we had it identified from the beginning, we gave ourselves time to do it, and we didn't give any one individual too much work. We divided that work through the A3, which is why we're providing the tracker today. I think that is probably the most important thing that you can have as part of this exercise, because once we had the organization in place, there was no kind of discussion about who was going to do what. We had, everybody knew, you know, had kind of assigned themselves what they were capable of getting done, where they saw their expertise could be valuable, until all of the templates and the standard work sets were assigned. We were flexible, so if somebody had some projects come up where they weren't going to meet their deadlines, that moved over to somebody else. We could have these really in-depth discussion every week where we focused on a single set. And we would go through, we'd put the code up, we would talk about what the code was trying to do, whether our template met that, whether the standard work met that, and really having that discussion led to, we've now got over 20 potential opportunities to improve the procurement code. Arizona goes through a 5-year rule review cycle, and our 5 year cycle starts again next year, and we're already prepared. We've got opportunities for either clarifying the procurement code, recommending changes in other areas. We developed a number of new trainings, both based on the templates and standard work documents, but also based on areas of practice that came up where procurement officers were having issues. So having procurement officers with a range of experiences be part of the project, and having folks who, you know, training is now part of our compliance team. So when we heard that there were opportunities for training, we were able to translate that into real new training courses available for procurement officers. And where we found that things really are better dealt with via form, we then created those, compliance then created those new forms to be used when decisions needed to be vetted at higher levels of procurement authority. So having a team with that kind of diversity to it, legal compliance, connections to training, procurement officers with varied levels of experiences, both our central procurement office, as well as some of our agencies as part of it, really created this great environment for discussion. You know, no one person really dominated that discussion. And by the end, we were just really excited to have gotten the project done, and we had a great lunch afterwards, where everybody was kind of celebrating the achievements together. So we put together this checklist for you so that if you want to replicate this within your own state, you know where we saw, you know, what our process was and kind of the order that we did things in. So, you know, if you're going to ask people to devote at least an hour a week to meeting on something, you got to make sure that you've got leadership buy-in, that this is a project that is high enough priority for your state based on your needs to get that project adoption and the strategic alignment with your leadership. We then selected and recruited team members, again, throughout the state with that range of experience. We went through and just, Jen actually took this piece on herself as the initial review of the procurement laws and rules to figure out everywhere where it said determination, everywhere where you had a written determination that was required. And then, you know, we chose a document format And as Kim mentioned earlier, it was something that we really took our time on to make sure that the format that we created was going to be useful for everyone. When we created our common template, we thought about what our agency needs are, which is why you might see there's a header missing at the top, because when our agencies use it, our procurement officers who are CPOs at agencies, they're going to put their agency header at the top. We didn't want it to be something where our centralized procurement office had made it more difficult to folks because they have to remove a header first and then put one in. Those are the things that we thought about when we first put that template together. And then making sure that the work was manageable for everyone who was part of the team meant dividing the list of determinations among the procurement officers and experts. We thought it was really important that folks choose their own set of determinations because there were things that people were more interested in or had more experience with. There were definitely ones where folks said, I've never done that. I should not be the person to work on that. And that process meant that people were really comfortable with what they were working with. Though when we had that discussion, there were changes to every single template and standard work document. Because when we would review it, we wanted to make sure it was legally sufficient, compliance sufficient according to the Arizona Procurement Code, make sure there was nothing missing, and make sure that procurement officers could actually use it, that it wasn't written as legalese, it wasn't written in a way that was confusing or overly complicated. We had to make it so that it was really useful to somebody who'd never written that before. And then we did that second level of review by managers to finalize the document. And we were lucky in that leadership didn't feel like there needed to be any additional review after that. So if you get it reviewed by the first and the second level, and you've got a process for improving it over time, that you could then go and have it finalized after that second level of review. So you really have to have not just buy-in, but trust from leadership on that too. And then we sent the final documents to the team that manages the website to post it, which in our case was the compliance team. And then once you have it posted, you have to make sure that people know what's available for them, are given opportunities for training. You know, the standard work itself is meant to be a training guide. Some people, though, need to see it in a newsletter to know that it's available. They need to see the SPO alert to know that it's available. Some people needed to see it in a training, to actually see how, you know, with somebody talking to them, walking them through it, that was the way they were going to learn how to use the documents. And then when we heard from folks, and we did, about, you know, you got a typo here, this doesn't work in this instance. When we got that feedback, we made sure to investigate it, respond to the person who made the feedback. In some cases, you know, promote that feedback amongst the state to give them credit for helping us improve the documents, because we wanted to create that positive feedback loop where folks knew that if they did go and help us improve it, that they were then going to get credit for helping us improve it. And it would encourage other people to help us improve the documents. That continuous improvement feedback, just invaluable. And we haven't, I mean, the rulemaking recommendations, that is part of our follow through on lessons learned. We haven't started the process for that quite yet, but we are ready. And we have that captured in a place where once that process really starts, we're already prepared. So not losing those lessons that you learned and the things that you learned along the way. I'm just going to check. We had, because this was part of, we were doing kind of there were a number of Greenbelt projects going on at the same time. So we were, our leadership was promoting process improvements. So this was received really well. It was promoted by leadership. People were really excited about the project because this was something that everyone agreed was needed for the state. And the fact that we actually got it done within the fiscal year meant that it was something that our leadership could tout to as, hey, they actually got this done. It wasn't just something that people spent a lot of time on. Because folks had flexibility, it didn't really take away from their day-to-day work. So yeah, we had a lot of positive adoption, positive feedback. Probably the best moment for me in working on this project was at the last Chief Procurement Officer CPO forum. when I asked everyone who has used the SPO library, and every single CPO in the room, their hand went up. So we've had statewide adoption, which to me is just fantastic. You know, it's what you hope for at the beginning, and you put the work in, and then when you actually, you know, we built it and then they came. So it was our field of dreams moment. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, actually, we do have a few in the chat, but you did answer the one about the adoption, so I thought that was right on. But we do have the question though, just if you could give a state specific advice, what would be the most important piece of advice you could give them in trying to implement something similar?
Get a good project manager and give them the authority to run the project. Find yourself a Jen Calamack. Kim, did you have another thought? Okay. Oh, thank you.
Abby, any advice?
I was going to say the exact same thing. Having the project manager keeping you accountable is what will have you be successful.
Well, I'm incredibly impressed of all that you were able to accomplish over the year, because we know on our side, it takes a lot to get that organized, and even developing the maintenance plan, like hats off. So we really just wanted to thank you all again for being here. I think this concludes our presentation today. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. But I did want to thank our presenters today, Jessica Klein, Abigail Medina Salas, and Kim Shelley, for the valuable information that they've shared today, and for working with us here at NASPO to bring it out to you guys. Also, I want to thank our attendees for being here on today's webinar. You will receive a follow-up email containing today's slides and the materials that Abby spoke about. Remember, this webinar qualifies as one contact hour for continuing education credits. To receive your certificate, simply fill out the survey in your browser window once you've exited the webinar. Again, ladies, thank you so much. We want to let everyone know that this webinar will be recorded and available for viewing on NASPO's YouTube page within the coming days. And again, the questions entered into the chat and Q&A boxes have been saved, and we will try and reach out to you via email to answer them. Again, thank you so much. We hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and keep up that process improvement.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.